This season, turn it up to 10. Sorta like a bad habit, we gon' do it again. Ready or not, we're gonna tie up some ends. Go tell a 36, try to grab all the friends. We're back like we never left. On track like a treble clef. Skip a beat on the 7th rest. Bring feast, we don't pass them over. We got the first fruits, no weighted shoulders. Can't live on that bread alone. Every word of God's mouth will fuel me on. That's scripture, that's Christ alone. That's grace alone, that's faith alone. All glory to God, cause that's his alone. Since the lamb's been slain, we can each belong. The Lord is my strength, my peace, and my song. And I'll lay it all down at the feet of his throne. This yoke is easy, this burden's light. Even with a loud mouth trying to eat at the mic. Even if we down south, the humidity spike. Veils torn in tubes, so we gon' be alright. It's all grace till the Hoff goes off. Heretics better run till the top blows off. Got them all stood still like a jaw full of Botox. Time to break them down like a jaw on a blow pop. Don't stop, they're in need of it though. Through grace by faith, they could easily grow. New wave, new age, new way to see bro. Now one truth, life, one way to his throne. Up like the cataract. Google it, we ain't dropping any rhetoric. Or maybe so, but that's for you to find out. Don't get tossed to and fro by any loud mouth. What you think it's Indiana Jones, son? It's the year of the feast, we gon' grow some. Time to put some meat in the bones. Gotta put the milk down, son, it's time to leave home. I'm just saying there's a time in the season you gotta be a Berean. If you just hear and believe it, you could be walking with demons. It could be rendering Caesar. All the things that go to God, that's a little like treason. Wait, welcome back, my friends. Did you ever really think we could pass the 10? Our stocks up, we about to trend. Cause the whole 36 wanna rap again. Wait, sounds too good to be true. Like Rabbinic candy land, ain't no ladders, just shoot. We hold true if it's loaded in the cannon. Best believe it's understanding. If it's not, it ain't proof. Like sacred name of the 2-house frame. ES start to tickle, then you feel it in the planks. You better not, you be better off. Not trying to hassle Hoff, you can take it to the bank. This night ready, he's about to go off. Put the ring on your finger from the Cracker Jack box. It's hide and seek, let's see if you can find out all the little messages you hear before the timeout. Ever seen a scholar with a blue belt? I have, he's about to make your food melt. The loud one and he strikes again. But don't let him close range, he gon' bite your friends. So relax, got it still in control. He knows every care, every fit that you hold. He knows every hair, every need for your soul. Nothing new around here, this story's been told. I bet you feel weak and your life is in tatters. With bruised feet, your body is battered. You can't reach, trying to climb up that ladder. Sit back and hold fast till Messiah matters.
These guys are laughing.
It is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. This is Messiah Matters number 486. My mind is filled with English Puritans. My name is Caleb Haig.
My mind is filled with love. I wrote that off.
All right. Yeah. Turning off my cell phone. Don't worry.
Before we started, Caleb and I were talking about John Owen. And so my mind was, I quickly Googled about John Owen and the Masoretic text, and then quickly emailed an article to Caleb. So anyway, it's all good.
Yeah.
Lessons from the Reformation.
Lessons from the Reformation. Oh, hang on, let me turn this down a little. I'll tell everybody where my mind is and why I'm so Puritaned out. So John Piper has a really good, he had a really good idea. And I've heard him say this numerous times. He said, when I was starting out, somebody else told me that I should find a teacher from the past, and I should attach myself to that teacher. Now, he chose Jonathan Edwards. And so if you read any John Piper, he constantly referenced Jonathan Edwards. He's written books on Jonathan Edwards, but basically what he did was he tried to always be reading something by Jonathan Edwards. And I thought, that is a really, really good idea, to just find somebody that is in the past, who's kind of a giant of theology, and attach and just try to be in their works and understanding who they are, and almost being taught by them. And so I chose John Owen, and I have purchased, Kindle's a wonderful thing. I've purchased so many of his books, and I've purchased his sermons, a book on his sermons, some that weren't even published during his lifetime. I've now purchased biographies on John Owen. I've downloaded a couple of PhD dissertations on John Owen's theology, and so I just have a huge catalog of John Owen, and boy, that guy, he's encouraging. His theology, his level of high Christology is just, it's unparalleled. His book, The Glory of Christ, is just unreal. It is really good. So anyway, I've been immersed in John Owen, and I've also been immersed in his life. And man, he didn't have it easy. He lost his wife, his first wife. He lost 11 children, including one that made it all the way to adulthood. Just a lot of loss. So pretty interesting. Anyway, I think it's a good practice to find a teacher. And obviously, I don't agree with John Owen on everything by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I disagree with him on a lot of theology, but it doesn't matter. It's interesting to see where we diverge from each other, but also where we agree with each other. So it's been a really interesting practice. But
especially when someone has written so prolifically, like over many, many years, like you can't not take away or, glean some wisdom from just, tracking.
John Owen put down
life.
over 6 million words to paper.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. He is one of he's written the largest, I think, if
that took a minute.
I think it still might be to date the largest commentary on Hebrews. It definitely was at the time he wrote, which once again, cool. I disagree with him on a lot of it. However,
now purchased. Give us a little quick lesson, Caleb. English Puritan, 16 or 1700s, 1700s,
He was
1600s?
Born in 1616, so 5 years after the King James was published.
But the idea is, he's in England, and it's like Catholicism has enmeshed itself with Christianity, and they're trying to, like, in the wake of the Reformation, right? They're trying to, or in its progress, trying to weed out, and the Bible is the core, and the traditions of man are being like weeded out.
Yeah, he saw a lot of his friends die. I think it was in the 70s, the 1660s or 70s. He saw a significant amount of his friends beheaded and then their heads put on spikes. So, and this is right around the time that his daughter dies. Now, he had 10 children that died in infancy, but he had one child who lived all the way to adulthood. So she's dying right around the same time that all of his friends are being beheaded, and he's trying to keep his head down, literally. He's trying to keep his head down so that he too is not, and he's trying to be ecumenical. He's trying to be a bridge. But perhaps one of the saddest things about John Owen is that he did all this work, and then at his death, he looked at it and thought that the Reformation was coming to an end, and that the church had rejected the Trinity and sola scriptura, and that they had lost. So he died thinking that the Reformation was a failure. And to me, out of all of his loss, that is the saddest thing to read. Is that his life work he thought was a total failure, even after all of his the loss of life. 6 million words, yeah, Over 6 million words. Unbelievable. Anyway, so yeah, it's the interesting thing too is that, you know, I have said so many times, and I honestly, truly do believe this. I believe that we're in the Second Reformation, and I've started to track when I think the Second Reformation started and how the progression of the Second Reformation has started to take shape, where we are right now with it, and you know, it's interesting. I would highly recommend everyone find a theologian from the past that they want to quote unquote learn from, you know, and attach themselves. Always be reading, even if it's just half a page a day or a page a day, to do that because, you know, I'm seeing, and maybe this is prideful, but I am seeing parallels in my own life and where I think I am in terms of this Reformation and John Owen. Now, certainly, I will never attain to the level of Owen, and I don't think that I'm a theologian like him.
You're at about 5.5 million words.
I think I'm at like 500. I mean, I don't see myself like that. What I'm saying is I see myself within a time period which is, you know, we're not being burned at the stake. We're not being beheaded, which praise the Lord. But, you know, will that ever come? Who knows? But the point is that I do see, you know, he was in a Reformation. And I think I'm in a Reformation. And so it's interesting to track the things that he's fighting for, like high Christology, like sola scriptura. These things are the exact same things that we're having to fight for in the Second Reformation against things like the Hebrew roots movement and whatnot. So it's just very interesting. And the practice that John Piper has given to me has been, I think, invaluable. And not only that, but the greatest part, perhaps, is that it has expanded my library quite a bit. I have a lot more books now, which is awesome. And they're good books. So it's not hard to find good theologians to make this practice with. Okay, I want to mention real quick, and then we're going to move on quickly, but I want to mention that the Torah resource, if I could talk, it would probably help. The Torah Resource Pronomian Conference, the TRPC, December 15th. Man, you guys should be getting excited. I think in the next week, before our next show, registration will be open. Now, we are going to be announcing slowly, we're going to be announcing who is going to be presenting. So we will announce our speakers, we will announce our keynote speakers, and we will announce paper topics. Okay, we'll announce all of this and our sponsors. We will announce all of this. I'm going to be announcing it on Instagram, on the Torah Resource Instagram page. Now, Mike is going to be in charge of announcing in other places, but I'm going to be in charge of Instagram. So if you are not following Torah Resource on Instagram, that's going to be the place to find all of the hottest, latest takes on the Torah Resource Pronomian Conference, December 15th. Registration opens this coming week. In between this Wednesday and the next Wednesday, registration should be open. You should be able to get your seat, and it's going to be amazing. I'm pumped for it. It's going to be awesome. Now, just remember, we're announcing on a schedule, Rob, so don't let any cats out of the bag during this show. Okay, with all of that said, let's do this. chegg at TorahResource.com, CHEGG at TorahResource.com. That's how you can get a hold of us and send us show topics. We sure do need show topics. It's always fun to read your guys' emails and see what topics you want us to talk about. You can also call our comment line, 253-465-3205. It's 253-465-3205. Don't talk to us. Just talk to an answering machine. Tell us how much you love us, hate us, disagree with us, agree with us, whatever. It doesn't matter. Listen to past shows and get merchandise on MessiahMatters.com. And perhaps the most important, this show is produced by TorahResource.com. And once again, make sure that you keep your eyes open for the conference registration coming out this coming week. It's going to be amazing. We are super excited for it. We got other things going on too. And by the way, check this out. Rob and I we're attempting currently to raise money to get to the ETS and SBL meeting. Rob will be presenting at this year's SBL meeting. But one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking to scholars and asking them if they would be willing to be keynote speakers for the next conference, the 2025 Pronomian Conference. And so we got some people that are already on the radar that we're going to talk to. Man, we're playing the long game here. You know what I'm saying? We are playing the long game. It's going to be good. And so if you're excited for this year, which you should be, this year is going to be amazing. Next year is going to be as amazing. It's going to be
amazinger.
It's going to be, I don't know about amazinger, but it's going to be as amazing for sure. Okay. Finally, last but not least, do not forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I know it sounds weird, but it really does help us. If you're already subscribed, do us a different favor. Click that like button. That helps us as well. And we just hit 10,300 subscribers just this last week. So, you know, I appreciate all of our new subscribers. It is a blessing to us. Okay. Let's jump in. This is going to be fun. Okay, I got a couple of things here. CA wrote in. Now, I did not pull this up, and I should have. Let me just grab this here. He says, I'm sure this has been answered before on a past episode, but at my small group recently studied the book of Ruth. This led us to discussing Deuteronomy 25. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy 25. This is what I did not have pulled up. And we're going to go verses 5 through 10. And he says, 25, and the law concerning the Levirate marriage. While I adhere to the law being applicable today for believers, some laws are hard to understand in today's context, especially verses 5 through 10 of chapter 25. Yeah, this Levirate marriage is definitely a difficult one for us in our modern day. Actually, I'm reading a book by Dr. Roy Gain right now, and he says that a lot of this particular law is in fact cultural, and I tend to agree with him on that in terms of the taking off of the sandal and before the elders, right? It's attached specifically. I think, now, Rob can correct me on this because we actually have not talked about this at all. So I don't know what Rob thinks about this, but I personally think that this law is attached directly to the land because it has to do with the inheritance of the land. And so if you have land in the in Israel, in the allotted portions that God has given, and your brother dies, the land needs to go to someone in the same tribe. Okay, and so this is attached directly. Now we have other laws that are attached directly to the land, and the argument could be made. Well, shouldn't we? In Deuteronomy it says when you're in the land of your enemies, and you recall all of these commandments which I'm commanding you today, then I will bring you back. So one of the questions could be, well, should we practice these things in the diaspora? It's a good question, and I don't know what the answer to that would be. In terms of taking off the sandal, Personally, I see this as a cultural element of shame. In other words, in our day and age, it wouldn't be shameful for someone to take my sandal off and say, hey, look, I got his sandal, right? We shame people in other ways in our day and age. I see this kind of like greet them with a holy kiss, right? In our culture in America, for a man to greet another man with a holy kiss would be inappropriate. And so we do other things. We greet each other with a side hug, or we greet each other with a hefty handshake, or whatever it may be. So I think that the sandal part is in fact cultural. We would probably shift this to something like saying that he is not manning up to his responsibility in front of the congregation, or that he is dropping the ball as a man. I don't know what we would do to shame a man in our modern day, but I'm sure we could think of something. But I do think that this is attached to land. So there's two different discussions here. One, is Levirate marriage still applicable today if you're in the land and you own land? That's the first discussion. The second discussion, would we do? Here's it, right? Because the city could be transferred. The city properties could be transferred, right? So if you live in the city, does the Levirate marriage, according to the Torah, is it still applicable, or does it have to be in the farmland? And these are all questions that would need to be hashed out. Rob.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's two. For me, just stop the talking off the cuff. There's like two levels to look at it. I totally agree. It's in the commandment and in the book of Ruth. It's tied to land. It has to do with preserving the name, or the memory of the deceased, and retaining that name with the land. So that's one aspect. but it also is a protection for the widow. It's a guarantee of commitment of the larger family to say you're good, like you're protected, like you belong here. And because in the economic situation, where in the ancient world, right? What would, we can go to the book of Ruth, because that's really the only place we kind of see it. We see it in a parable form, if you want it, or a legal dispute form, when the Sadducees try to trick Yeshua and say, hey, a man had a woman, no children. Like 7 guys die, right? And she has no kids. What happens? So they use it as a legal kind of case study, but it's not anchored in like the book of Ruth, where it's like, oh, this is an account of something that went down. But the protection of the woman, I think, is a core priority there. A challenge in our day and age is that
totally agree.
The world we're in is that would a woman even want? I think, you'd have to do some digging on this, but even the most ultra-Orthodox Jews don't see themselves as living in their tribal ancestral land.
Let's pause for 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, let's pause for 10 seconds. I keep having my internet go out, so I'm actually thinking about switching internet. Actually, keep going, because right now we're in the green. So, but I am aware it's going on. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Yeah, even in Israel today, among the ultra-Orthodox, this commandment is not interpreted in terms of application for ancestral land, because name me one of the ultra-Orthodox Jews that imagine themselves to be living on their ancestral property, living an agricultural life, right? They're not. They live in little tight-knit communities, and a lot of the way they understand the Torah is through prayer, Talmud study, and this sort of thing, and rabbinic halakha, strict adherence to traditions of men. But additionally, in the Kabbalistic world, this is taken to refer to reincarnation. There are so even if you wanted to set aside the Christian world for a minute and the pronomian question of how to apply it, we don't have, like with the case of tzitzit, right? You have a corresponding practice in the Jewish world, or how animals are ideally slaughtered, right? You have a corresponding tradition kept in the rabbinic world. But if you're going to say, oh, well, what about Levirate marriage? You can't look to a Jewish world to represent it. You're going to see the same problems, like, wow, we don't really know how to apply this commandment in the world today. So,
one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I think that the Western culture absolutely hates, but I actually find encouraging, this is going to offend a lot of people, is that according to the Torah, the woman is attached to the property. And what I mean by that is she's in charge of the property. In other words, the reason that the Ruth story, that the whole story happens, is because she is attached to that property. She's in control of the property. You don't get the property unless you take the property manager as well, right? And so Ruth is taken in Levirate marriage because she comes with the property. In other words, I see, and some people are going to say, well, she's seen as property. That may be true, especially in that culture. I'm not denying that could be, that's certainly probably the case. However, with that said, I also believe that she's in charge of the property. And we see this in Proverbs 31, right? The woman of the house it's not that she's seen as a piece of this property that, like the man gets to rule over her. It's totally the opposite. She's in charge of everything. She runs the household. She runs the fields. She runs the servants. She runs everything. And she's in charge of it. She's like the Carson of Downton Abbey, right? I mean, she runs it all. And if the man wants to retain the property, he has to take the property manager with her. Now, a lot of people are going to be offended by that. I actually find that to be encouraging, especially in the ancient culture where so many women were seen as property instead of putting a woman up into a higher status. And I think that this is really what the Torah is doing, is attempting to put her into a higher status. And I think that we see this particularly when we look at ancient law codes around Israel and how this was not the norm. So anyway, I think that, Rob, I think you're absolutely right. What is really the concern here for the Torah is, I mean, obviously land and property is extremely important. Where the land goes, right? The land cannot be given outside of the tribe that it belongs to. With that said, the woman is of the greatest importance. She's the one that the Torah is concerned about. And she's the one that this law really is attempting to protect. In other words, she's not just thrown like, oh, you're not with this guy anymore, so we're going to throw you out. You're not really part of our tribe. You don't have any kids, so there's no worth to you anymore. No, she is guaranteed to continue on in this tribe and to be protected by the tribe, to be protected by the elders, to be protected by the property, essentially.
Well, here and right, if you imagine the woman's viewpoint who's coming into a marriage, it's not like, oh, my husband dies. Is there anything on the law books as to what happens? No, she knows in advance that by marrying this man, and that all the family that she's being welcomed into this family as a whole, and they say are in full intention. Whether the guy you married lives or dies, you belong, and we are going, and we see you as, like, in a way, it's the grafted on tree, right? It's like there's going to be fruit, there's going to be offspring that is going to be good for all of us, and you are going to be protected and provided for. And even in spite of the sad fact of this particular loss, it isn't the end of this family relationship. And that's the big picture, the way I see it.
Both Roy Gain and Averbeck talk about the, they don't say essence. What is it? It's essentially like the laws in Torah are giving us case law, but there's a principle behind it. So, for instance, Roy Gain gives the example of Yeshua taking the don't muzzle an ox while it treads, right? And then he applies that same principle to teachers. So there's no law, there's no law in the Torah that says, hey, you got to pay your teachers, but there's a principle. Right. And so when we look at the Levirate marriage, I think Gain is right in the idea that there's a lot of cultural things that are going on here. But there is a principle here that I think we as believers in the diaspora need to take to heart, which is when a husband dies, and we see this even among unbelieving. We do see this among unbelieving communities. At least in some part. So, for instance, and the one that comes to mind is the attempted Trump assassination. Right? There's a guy who gets shot in the head and dies. And then what happens? Well, the larger community, and I'll keep going with this analogy because there's places where this could miss too. The larger community gets together and gives her, and raises $1 million for this lady to be able to continue on. So right now, this is a Torah principle in terms of the larger community is attempting to help this lady continue on in her life and be able to take care of her kids. This is a Torah principle.
Right. Now, it's a particular tragedy in a way that because upside down from our world today, where on the left they're trying to find every way to eliminate offspring, whether changing someone's saying that they can change their gender and beyond.
Right.
Whatever,
yep.
or heaven forbid, the abortion, strong, pro-choice movement and all this kind of stuff, and promiscuity and this kind of thing. It's different when you had a culture that is so pro-life that like looking forward to babies, right? Looking forward to babies. Like we have to recognize, in my view, that when Ruth married Machlon, I think if I remember right, was the brother she married. They wanted a family. Like that was a prime thing. Is we're gonna have babies. We're gonna raise children, right? And that is like the big thing. And when it doesn't happen and the husband's taken out of the way, that's seen as like that's a special case. That's oh wow, like a major value of our culture was disrupted here, and we're gonna have an insurance. As you can see with the time of the Sadducees, they exploit it as if in a hypothetical. Well, let's say she married 7 brothers, and like they stretch it to an absurd, right? I mean, they're not saying that ever happened. They're just saying they're trying to create a case scenario to try to trick Yeshua.
So,
anyway.
There's one last thing I want to say about this. Going back to the analogy of the gentleman who was shot at the Trump rally, right, and died. Certainly, the larger community gives, they've given this lady $1 million, which is going to set her up financially. However, this is not the end of it, according to the Torah. In other words, if a woman was to marry a brother, she is now taken care of in multiple, not just financially. She's taken care of in terms of being a wife. She's taken care of in terms of being in a community and a family and all these things. I see this as the role of the church today within America. I mean, granted, once again, we're in the diaspora, so things are different. But ultimately, there are communities that people should be in. People should be in believing faith communities to be able to take care of this woman. Men need to come alongside of her, from families, with families. Men and women, husband and wives need to come alongside her and be there for her, be able to fix things on the house, be able to, there's other things that need to be taken care of. It's not just, hey, we're going to give you $1 million, now figure it out. And I feel like that's a little bit how our culture works today. It's like, oh, well, we'll just write you a check. And that's going to, money's going to fix everything. Money doesn't fix everything. There is a element of emotional stability that comes along with the idea of Levirate marriage. And I think this is something that churches and faith communities, especially in the pronomian realm, we need to be good and better at coming alongside people who have had tragedies happen like this and continue to, and I've dropped the ball, by the way, on this. Full disclosure, my brother died. He left behind five children and a wife, and I try to stay in contact with them as much as possible, but they're in a different state. It can be very difficult to try to maintain that level, of hey, I'm here for you, kind of a thing. So I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. In fact, if anything, I'm pointing my finger back at me. This is a difficult thing to do. It is really difficult, but there is a Torah principle here. So that's the point. Okay. I hope that answers the question. It probably doesn't. Full disclosure, probably doesn't, but at least it's a good conversation. Okay. Last week we did a video. Our main video was R.L. Solberg. R.L. Solberg did a video, and if you don't remember it, go back and watch the video. He basically says that he can topple the Hebrew roots movement. What he means by that is Torah observance. With one question: Is sin sacrifice still applicable today? And the reason why is because he says if it's not, then the Torah is changed and all of Torah observance topples. But if it does, then then Christ, our sin is no longer atoned for through sacrifice because Christ. Do you remember this? Should I pull the video up? Anyway. No, that's all right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I remember it.
We said he's got salvation wrong. What he's saying is that atonement for sin came from
that Old Testament people.
Sin sacrifice. Yeah,
we're under a different
soteriology.
Different soteriology.
So we've gotten some pushback on this. Actually, Andrew Schumacher jumped into the comment section and said, "No, you guys got this all wrong." And Schumacher also said that that we have never addressed sin sacrifice the way that we need to as it relates to the death of Christ and how that all works. Now, after going back and forth with Schumacher a bit in the comment section, I thought, you know what, this is ridiculous. I just picked up the phone and called him. And I said, Schumacher and I in the comment section, there are some great memes where you got these two dogs, right? And this happens all the time. You have these two dogs, they'll be barking at each other through a fence, and they're going to kill each other. And then all of a sudden somebody opens up the fence and they come in and they're just kind of like hanging out like, hey, how's it going? This is Andrew Schumacher and I, right? If we're behind the keyboards, it's like we're yelling at each other. But as soon as we talk, it's very civil. I like Andrew. I consider Andrew one of my friends. And so I just called him and I said, look, man, clearly I'm not understanding what you're saying here. I'm not getting it. And so let's talk about this. Let's talk about it publicly. So tomorrow I am doing an interview with Andrew Schumacher. We're only going to talk about sin sacrifice, and we're only going to talk about how it relates to Christ and some of the things that he thinks I'm wrong on and the way that he sees me being wrong on that. I'm going to try to understand what he thinks I'm wrong on. And then we will publish it. Probably I'm going to publish it. And I think if he wants to, he can publish it on his as well. It's not going to be any kind of a debate or anything like that. It's just going to be I just want to understand what he's saying and where he thinks we went wrong. Okay. So with that said, we had somebody else who jumped into the comments section. Now, I don't know what this handle is, but it's at MRFITTA. Okay. And this guy says, sorry, mate, I've listened to a lot of Dr. Solberg, and he 100% knows what salvation means and how we are saved by grace. Now, this person may be 100% right, okay? We've had other people in the comments section say, yeah, I've pushed on Solberg's soteriology before, and he's way off. I don't know where to fall on this. I don't know Solberg's work well enough. I do know I am getting his book, and I said I didn't want to read it, but I'm getting his book because there is a paper that's coming out that pushes against Solberg's book, Torahism. And so I want to read Solberg's book so I can see where the discrepancies are here. Anyway, he says, this person in the comment section says, hopefully you'll leave pride aside and acknowledge this presentation wasn't a good look. In fact, you might want to take this vid down as it's nonsense. Okay, so.
Take our video down?
Right. So.
Oh, yeah, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, why?
So here's the thing is that, look, I have no problem saying that I'm wrong if I'm wrong on somebody's position. However, if Solberg is strong on soteriology, salvation by grace, and that the sin sacrifice did not, now I fully admit, and this is where it gets difficult. I fully admit that the sin sacrifices of the Torah atone for sin. Now that sounds really bad, and maybe this is exactly what Solberg is saying, but it atoned for sin in a temporal way, as it relates to the temple. And Schumacher and I will get into all this when we do our interview. Okay. And I think that when we talk about atoning for sin as it relates to the temple, there is a temporal element that goes along with this. Clean, unclean is another way that we could think of like temporal elements of the temple, right? There's an atonement that needs to be made, especially in like Leviticus 4, the priest who has an unintentional sin, he can't come into the Holy of Holies anymore, this temporal place, unless he does a sacrifice, because this will atone for the sin in the temporal elements so that he come back into the temple. Okay, so in that respect, it atones for sin. And this is how the Torah talks, right? And this is how we can get to places like Hebrews 10:4, where it says the blood of bull and goats never takes away the sin. In other words, it's not a spiritual atonement.
Never, meaning not in Moses' day, not in Daniel's day.
Right. So the point is that there is an atonement, but it's a temporal atonement. Now, the question at hand that would need to be answered is this what Solberg meant? If Solberg was trying to say, well, there's a temporal element of atonement that the Hebrew roots movement needs to deal with, this is clearly not what he was trying to get at. I would challenge anyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would challenge anyone on this. What he's trying to do is give Christians a gotcha. And he's trying to do it from a place of soteriology. And it's a wrong place of soteriology. He's trying to build up a straw man so that that his audience will say, "Oh, look, these Hebrew rooters, they can't even talk about sacrifice. This is a straw man argument." So then the question is, which one's worse? If he gets salvation wrong himself, or if he knows what salvation is, but he's trying to give people a gotcha moment from a wrong place of soteriology. Either way, his video is not only not helpful, it's misleading then. And if it's misleading, then he's putting up arguments against the Torah movement just to try to put arguments up, which also is misleading and wrong. So I understand that this person thinks that we're wrong on Solberg's place of soteriology. And if we are, okay, that's fine. His video is still egregious because what it's doing is he's trying to give false gotcha movements just to get to the Torah movement. That's ridiculous. Now, Granted, Schumacher has said, "Nah, I don't see it that way." And so I don't know how he sees it. I don't know how else you would be able to see it. But we'll talk about that tomorrow, and then that'll be up sometime the next week, hopefully. So, maybe Schumacher will be able to show me that I am way off on this. But here's the thing. Even if we are way off on this, and you know what? We've been wrong. I've been wrong about things many times before. If I'm way off on something, it's not that I'm going to take down a video. It's that I'll say that video is wrong. The video's already up. The episode's already up. It is what it is. We said what we said. You can't take words back, but we can say that we were wrong on something. But Solberg's video, I see it as egregious no matter what. If he knows what salvation is, it's almost as bad because now he's just trying to give false soteriology arguments to Christians so that they can say, "Oh wow, look at this. These Hebrew rooters are so way off." I find, and by the way, it's not just Solberg that we've called out on this kind of stuff. We called out 119 Ministries on their Christmas video because they were using fossilized customs, the two Babylons as source materials. So and I agreed with them on their conclusion on a lot of that stuff. But still, they were getting there the wrong way. You can't put up a false argument to try to prove your point. You have to get there the right way. And if Solberg is using false soteriology, even when he knows the truth, then it's even worse. That's even worse. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong all the way around. And if that's the case, that's fine. But I just don't see how this video is not a try to gotcha moment. Okay. I just wanted to mention that because if you're in the comment section of our last video and our last short video, you'll see a lot of this going on. And I tried to respond as much as I could to people. And, the best I could. I got a lot going on, so I was trying to respond as I was working. But if you've seen the comment section, that's what's going on with all of this. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's move on. Got some good comments in the comment section, by the way. Okay, let's move on to this one right here. Sabbath is Saturday. At Sabbath is Saturday. Wrote in and said, so can a believer of Yahweh and Yeshua eat pork, shrimp, duck, etc.? No one can agree on this. Well, I would say that from a pronomian perspective, we agree fully on this. In fact, I would even see that the Hebrew roots movement is pretty unified. The Torah movement, the Messianic Jews. Now, the Messianic Jews are going to be different because they're going to say that a person doesn't have to do this, but it's culturally they can. So yeah, you're right. The Messianics lose on this. Duck is kosher, by the way, according to the Torah. So you can eat duck. So I don't think anybody disputes that. Maybe they do. I don't know. But no, I would say that believers. I would say that it's an abomination to God to eat pork, shrimp, anything unkosher. And I don't think that that's really disputed among the Torah movement. Rob?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say to that. Yeah, I don't know who's disputing it. I like to say that people are arguing about, unless the question is just saying, some Christians say there's no problem eating pig, and if you don't eat pig, you're obviously under the law. And then you have like a pronomian person say, wait a minute, no, the God defined clearly what is acceptable food and what is an abomination, and that maintains whether you're Old Testament or New Testament time frame. It doesn't matter. So maybe it's just that simple. The question is just about that argument. But I'm with you, at least if I heard you correctly. I don't know of people arguing about whether or not Christians can eat like something specific like shrimp or something. Now, I do know that in the Muslim world, they will eat shrimp.
Right.
So in the Muslim idea that claims to be the authentic Abrahamic religion, that shrimp is acceptable. What I don't know about this, and maybe people who have come from Islam or scholars of Islamic history would know, is that projected backwards. In other words, do Muslims see Abraham as eating shrimp, Moses as eating shrimp, Jonah as eating shrimp, Jesus as eating shrimp? As like, yeah, they would have eaten shrimp, no problem. I don't know the answer to that question. But in terms of just between messianic groups disputing, like, can you eat a certain animal or not? I don't know about those kinds of arguments.
There are MJAA groups, and I think there's even UMJC, right? I mean, I know high up, like head scholars within the UMJC who eat unkosher food. And the way that they get around that is they just say, well, it's the same as the Christian argument, which is, well, Christ came and did all the away with that. The reason that we would keep kosher is for cultural. In other words, it's an identity marker, but we don't have to if we don't want to. So that's where that could get a little odd. And what I would see this is a Christian, a standard mainstream Christian teaching as opposed to a pronomian teaching. So those who are truly pronomian, I would say, are going to say, no, you can't eat unkosher food. In fact, I would say that that's probably one of the high elements of, like, one of the most important elements of a pronomian perspective in terms of food is extremely important to God. We see this throughout this is one of the reasons that I've centered on meals.
In the garden,
because
it was
exactly.
The first commandment is don't eat, is eat and don't eat. So yeah, that's it.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on. We got time for one more. Nicholas writes in. This was a long time ago, by the way, so sorry, Nicholas, for not answering this earlier. Nicholas writes in, he says, Shalom, Caleb, do you believe any truth in these, quote, deliverance ministries? Deliverance is certainly possible, and we wouldn't have a faith without it, but deliverance is ultimately a heart change rather than a performance, which unfortunately a lot seem to be from my perspective. These people that build such huge ministries from them and film people in the audience convulsing, etc., as commonplace for deliverance seems off. I think it's ultimately how one would define deliverance. I'd be interested to hear your and Rob's take. Okay.
Can I just give an initial response to this?
Please.
The accounts of amazing, like awesome, God glorifying healings are in the Bible are largely public. You know, like the woman with the flow of blood for a decade or was it 12 or 18 years? I don't remember. People knew who this woman was. She thought, I just need to touch Yeshua's tassel, right? The hem of his garment, his tzitzit. The healing, like it wasn't a production in advance for show. Thinking about the Pentecost and how Yeshua's disciples stayed in Jerusalem at the temple and continued to worship at the temple during Pentecost and thereafter. And there was the man at the gate, beautiful, right? And we know the story of Peter, silver and gold have I none, right? But in the name of Yeshua of Nazareth, right? Get up and walk. Like it's that kind of thing where everybody's like, what just happened? And so I'm a believer in that. I've never seen it personally, but that's how God works. And that's awesome. If there's people who do that, God has, in a particular moment done this kind of work, that's amazing. But the productive, like the key that kind of triggered me was that idea of a performance, because I that's my sense too, is that this is like, it's fine-tuned performance that I've seen. And again, I'm not Pentecostal. I haven't been to a bunch of these revivals, but I have seen some footage, on television, produced kind of things of healing ministries. And there's something in me that just doesn't believe it. And so you could say, is that unbelief? Oh, Rob, you're an unbeliever.
I have thoughts on this.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ostracize and lose about half of our audience or more here in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Don't get me wrong. I went to an Assemblies of God church for almost 2 years of my life. I've been around the Deliverance Ministry. I've been around the speaking in tongues. I've felt the presence of the Lord during these revivals. Really, I've been very caught up in these kind of things, all sorts of stuff, right? And I have no doubt of several things. Number one, God can use any means that he wants. So if somebody listening to this came to faith through a healing ministry like Benny Hinn, I have friends who came to Christ through Benny Hinn, a Benny Hinn revival, or you came to Christ through a Pentecostal church or something like that. I have no problem with that. There are hundreds, thousands of people who have come to Torah through Pentecostal churches. So I'm not saying that God can't use any means. I also know, literally, I know a lot of people who fight me on this and say, I know that God had me speak in tongues. The experience is real. The feelings are 100% genuine. There's no doubt in these people's minds, okay? And that's fine. And if you're one of those, that you can feel however you want. I'm going to tell you how I feel about that, though. I would say that the Deliverance Ministries, at least the ones that I know of, I can't think of any that are not attached to the Pentecostal movement or speaking in tongues and that kind of thing. I believe that speaking in tongues in the gibberish that goes on in the Pentecostal movement is not of God. In fact, I think it's of Satan. I really do. I think that feelings are manipulated. I think that people get wrapped up in feelings, and I think that I think it is a deceptive. I think it's deceptive, and I think that it's spoken against in Scripture. I've never, ever seen somebody speak in tongues and everybody say, wait, where's the interpreter? And then the interpreter gets up and tells what the person's saying. Not only do I not buy it, but it makes me feel when I hear that kind of stuff, I feel spiritually dark. It does not bring anything light to me at all. Now, once again, I'm going to feelings here, but the difference is I can go to the scriptures and I can show you where the scriptures say this is not right, okay? At least that's how I feel. And so anytime you have a deliverance ministry, now, once again, God can use anything. So I'm not saying that someone couldn't be healed at one of these deliverance ministries. Somebody could be healed. We see the same thing happen when Saul goes to the witch of Endor and says, raise Samuel for me. And then what happens? She raises Samuel and she is freaked out. This is the first time I think this has ever happened to her. So could Benny Hinn actually heal someone? Yeah. Would he be astonished? I think so, because I think it's kind of a fraud. I think he's a fraud. And I think that deliverance ministries, anytime you have a deliverance ministry that has speaking in tongues, has falling on the, being slain in the spirit, all that kind of stuff, I think it's a false ministry. And once again, I'm not saying that God can't use that. And I'm not saying that people can't come to Christ through it. God used a donkey to speak to Balaam. So I'm not saying that God can't use it. But I do not think that these ministries are legit, and I think that they are used 99% of the time to lead people into feelings as opposed to the truth of the Word of God. That's what I think. So I'll watch the subscriber count go down.
Well,
and
I have
I
to
don't
share
care.
too. So there's a story in my family that my grandmother, when she was like 2 years old or 1 or 2 years old. So this is like 1920. They lived in just south of Spokane, Washington, out in the farm country. And there was a healing revival of John G. Lake in downtown Spokane at the time. And the story goes in my family is that my grandmother's mother took her sick infant who had like bad pneumonia. I hope I'm remembering this correctly, and was healed.
Sure.
At this John G. Lake. And to this day, they've rebuilt this healing rooms kind of thing, and they're trying to like spread awareness, or at least they were for a while, John G. Lake, like 100 years ago, and like that there's maybe some residual healing,
sure,
spirit or whatever. But it seems that there was a legit revival 100 years ago in Spokane, and that my own grandmother, that my own existence, you could argue, and that of everybody that came from my grandma, through this healing, that where a mom took her infant child who was deathly sick to a preacher named John G. Lake, and the baby was healed.
So if you want to, I'm
like, okay, I don't have any reason not to believe that, but again, that's, I don't know what to say. That's just what I've been told.
Several things here. Number one, I'm not saying that the gift of tongues doesn't exist. I'm saying that the gift of tongues in terms of gibberish doesn't exist, for those in the chat room who are arguing this.
That's a good, and to the John G. Lake, I don't know if tongues was part of that or not. I really don't know.
Once again, God can use any situation. What I'm saying is the gift of tongues is, and there are stories of this. Actually, if you want to read about some of the most amazing miracles that have happened, Dr. Craig Keicher, who I would consider to be Pentecostal, and who, by the way, professes that he has spoken in tongues, in the gibberish kind of tongues. So once again, there are great believers out there who believe this, and I'm not trying to down anyone's specific experience. But right. I look at the scriptures, and I don't think that speaking gibberish where no one can understand is what the Bible is talking about. I think that, and there are stories, I've met people who have talked about being able to preach all of a sudden in a language that they don't know, and everybody knew what they were saying. So
that's
there are
awesome.
Stories out there. Yeah, there are stories out there, and you can read. Keicher has a 2-volume set on miracles. It was supposed to be a footnote in his Acts commentary, which became 2 volumes. And so you can read his 2-volume commentary on miracles, and he relates some of the most amazing stories throughout the world of miracles happening. And he interviewed thousands of people, hundreds of people at least, in various countries, and talked to them about the miracles that they had seen and witnessed and all these kind of things. I'm not denying that these kind of things happen. I'm also not denying that the gift of tongues is something that happens. I think it does happen, and I think it happens when God wants it to happen. However, the idea, the Bible specifically speaks about people speaking in gibberish and no one understanding what they say. You're not allowed to do that. So anytime you sin, it can't be of the Lord. If the Bible tells you not to do that and you do it and you say it's of God, something is not right here.
Well, let me ask you this, because in 1 Corinthians, he talks about if someone speaks in a tongue, let there be someone interpreting, right? So let's say someone speaks in a tongue and someone interprets, but the person who speaks in tongue doesn't like the interpretation or shuts down the interpretation. Does that ever happen? Like if someone speaks in tongue and I interpret it as gibberish, that's gibberish.
Right.
And they're like, no, it's not. You can't, my gift is real, but your gift of discernment telling me that it's gibberish is not real. Like you have to accept my speaking in tongues, but I don't have to accept that God has given you discernment. It's a sticky place, man.
The John 17 Project says, I have personally experienced worshiping at a church in Mexico and suddenly being able to worship in Spanish. That I believe in. I am not downing that at all. That's not what I'm talking about.
I would accept that. That makes sense.
That is 100% what the Bible talks about in terms of speaking in tongues, and that is not what I'm talking about. When I go, and this has happened to me many times, I'll go to a worship service at a church. There's a vineyard here in Gig Harbor. It was one of the most disconcerting experiences that I've ever had in a church. People were falling all over each other. People were like drunk in the spirit and speaking in gibberish. It felt to me like this had nothing to do with the Bible. And so once again, I'm not talking about being able to speak in another language. I believe that the Lord can give that gift and does give that gift. In certain instances, and we have someone attesting to that in our chat room. I'm not pushing against that. What I'm pushing against is the idea that I have some secret language that nobody around me can understand, not even me, but I'm speaking to
and
God.
You can't judge me.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't judge me. You actually have to hold space for me to do this, and if you don't, you're not being, you're not a true Christian or something, and that's a difficult, area there.
We're going to call it right there. I think I've probably ticked off enough people. So, hey, I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat room. I do hope that that the conversations that we have, even if you disagree with us, which I expect I know a lot of people do because you tell us in the comments, but even if you disagree with us, I hope that our conversations at least spark some kind of want to get into the scriptures more, or to research things, or to consider things in your own theology. Even if you disagree with us, I hope that we're in some way being beneficial to you. That's that we pray. Rob and I pray together every single week that's exactly what happens with this show, is that we're encouraging people in the faith. Okay. If you want to be part of the conversation, see Hegg at TorahResource.com, CHEGG at TorahResource.com. If you want to tell us how much you disagree with us or agree with us, you can do so, 253-465-3205. Do not forget to go to Torah Resource, and sometime this week we'll have registration up for the conference. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right. We hope that this conversation has done at least one thing, and that is to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. Why? I think you know why. Because Messiah matters.